Alright, so when you're thinking about addition and subtraction with positive and negative numbers, again, no matter how long our sequence is of numbers, I suggest that you break it down into pairs. But I find it very useful not to think of all the different rules for addition and subtraction, but instead to think of numbers as movement on a number line. This is different from concepts that you might have thought about in the past. For example, the number 1, in the past you might have thought 1 could mean one apple or one sheep or one person, which is still true. But now let's go further and think of the number 1 as a direction that you move on the number line. So, let's talk about number line movement. For number line movement, we always start at 0. So the movement that you're thinking about, the first step, the movement always starts at 0. This is 0. So here we are at 0. And our first movement is 1. Well, we move in two directions on the number line. In this direction, you move in the positive. If we go in this direction, we're moving in the negative. Now, that's especially true for addition. Positive to the right, negative to the left. So let's start with 1. We're adding 1 from 0. That's where we start, 0. So plus 1. So we hop up to 1. And now we're sitting here at 1. Next we add negative 2. Well, when you add negative 2 to where you are, you're going to go in the negative direction from where you are. So you're at 1. Let's go in the negative direction 2 spaces. 1, 2. And now we're here at negative 1. And that's true. 1 plus negative 2 is negative 1. Next we're taking away 3. Subtraction has the opposite effect with numbers. In addition, if you add a positive, you go to the right. But with subtraction, think about it. If you're taking away stuff, you're going to decrease in value. So the negative direction, this is also a decrease in value direction. Whereas this direction is an increase in value. So let's go back. First we had 1, so we increased our value by 1. We're adding 1 positive. Then we're adding 2 negatives to that. We're decreasing our value and hopping 2 places in the negative direction. So far our answer is negative 1. But next we're taking away 3 more. Right here, taking away 3. That means we're decreasing our value by 3. So let's go further. 1, 2, 3. And now we're here at negative 4. We were at negative 1, we took 3 away. Now to subtracting a negative 4. And this is, I think, what throws most people off when you subtract a negative. Understandable. But let's think about movement. If subtracting a positive, subtracting 3 decreases your value. Subtracting a negative, the opposite of subtracting a positive, must do the opposite thing. That's the idea here. Let me say that again. Subtracting positive 3 decreases your value by 3. However, subtracting a negative value will increase your value. This goes back to the idea of debt. If negative value was debt, if you take debt away, you increase your value. That's one analogy that might work here. So far we're at negative 4. Our last step is to take away negative 4 from negative 4. So, instead of getting lost in the numbers, let's think about the movement. We're sitting at negative 4 and we're taking away a negative. Well, I know taking away positive 4 would bring me this way, to the left. But we're not taking away positive 4, we're taking away negative 4. So positives and negatives are opposites. We move in the opposite direction. How far do we move? Well, 4 places. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're at our final answer of 0. 4 categories in addition that you're really breaking down when you're talking about movement on the number line. The first, the most intuitive, is that if you have a positive and you add a positive, you still have positive value. This is intuitive too, if you think about it. If you have negative value and you add more negative value to that, you're just decreasing your value. You still have a negative. When you mix the signs in addition, the larger absolute value tells you the sign. What does that mean? Let's look at a number line. If we have the numbers -3 plus 1, what's the answer? Well, first of all, we know it has to be negative. Why? Let's look at the absolute value. Absolute value is just distance from 0 to that number. So for -3, the absolute value is 3. It's from 0 all the way over to -3. However, look at the absolute value from 0 to 1. It's much smaller. If you think of the number line as some kind of a balance or seesaw where 0 is the middle, if this person's further out, or if they have more distance, they're heavier. So in this case, -3 outweighs the positive, and our answer is negative. So before we even know what the answer is, we're halfway there. We know it's negative. -3 plus 1, well, you hop from 0 to -3, and you hop up 1 to -2. So in fact, the answer is -2. So the absolute value tells you the sign. You could think of subtraction with absolute value, but it might be useful not to. Let's start with a positive minus a negative, and a negative minus a positive. Think about your emotional feelings. If you have positive feelings and you take negative feelings away, if you're taking them away, well, you're going to be a really positive person. However, if you have negative feelings and you take any positive feelings you might have away from you, you're going to be really negative. Now, these two categories actually have the same approach. If the first number has a higher value, not absolute value, but value, then the answer is positive. What is value versus absolute value? The more positive a number, the further to the right on the number line, the higher the value. So let's just look at that for 1 second. If you have a number line and you have like -2 and -1 and the numbers 0 and 1 and 2, 2 has the highest value, then 1, then 0, then -1. Well, -1 has a higher value than -2. It's not absolute value. Absolute value is difference. It's distance from 0. This is totally different. So we're talking about value. And value increases as you go to the right. This makes sense if we look at some examples. If you have 3 minus 2, that's positive 1, because 3 has a higher value than 2. If you have 2 minus 3, well, you're taking 3 away from 2, start at 2. 1, 2, 3. The answer is -1. You get a negative because the first number has a smaller value than the second. Fortunately, this works with negatives as well. If you have -1 minus 2, -2, the answer is, well, here's -1, and then subtract -2, 1, 2. You get +1. Why? The value of -1 is higher than the value of -2. If we reversed it, so it's -2 minus -1, well, that's going to be -1. It's negative because -2 has a lower value than -1. Same thing with 2 and 3. 2 had a lower value than 3, so it was negative. So with subtraction, these two have similar patterns.